Today we're talking about a property buying disaster that cost one home buyer almost $100,000. What happened? Who was at fault? And what can you learn from this tragically avoidable mistake?
Welcome to Your First Home Buyer Guide, the podcast for first home buyers who want to move it along and become homeowners. But most importantly, it is for you to become an educated home buyer.
I'm Megan and that was Veronica. We're both buyer's agents and probably old enough to be your mum. But it's a good thing because between us we've got over 45 years experience to share with you and bucket loads of stories about avoidable mistakes. Together, we're going to make sure you get unbiased and real information you can rely on. Allow us to guide you on your home buying journey. We want you to become an educated home buyer so that you can stop looking for your first home and actually become a proud homeowner.
We've got loads of great tips for you in this episode, and if you'd like more useful tools, head over to the website homebuyeracademy.com.au, and there you'll get access to our free mini course, How to Price a Property Like a Professional. You will also find the holy grail of home buying education, Your First Home Buyer Guide, the online course for people who want to become educated home buyers. We created this for you to help you get on the right path to home ownership for your first home and beyond.
But before we get into the interesting stuff in this week's episode, we've got the boring bit, the disclaimer. You of course know that nothing in this podcast is to be taken as personal advice. We always recommend getting the advice of an expert in their field who takes the time to understand your personal situation. We've done our very best to ensure that the content is correct at the time of recording. Things change rapidly, so always check with the relevant government authority and your trusted advisors to get the most up-to-date information.
A significant reason we started Home Buyer Academy was because we want first home buyers to learn what to do in the right order so they don't make these avoidable mistakes. So today's episode is about a recent Supreme Court decision where the buyer was ordered to forfeit his $98,000 deposit plus interest. It was a huge lesson and one that we really want you to benefit from.
Yeah, this is a shocker, actually, this one. And I'm sure the buyer is still shaking his head. He's probably still crying into his beer or milk or something. I mean, this is really terrible. All right. So we're going to sort of run through what was written in the Courier Mail. Reported on in the Courier Mail. And so this fellow, Queenslander, because this is in Queensland, he thought he was purchasing a property. And this is the process he went through. So he was told he needed to pay a deposit of $98,500, right? But he was just a little bit late in paying it, just a little bit, right?
Actually, it was a couple of days, really.
Couple of days.
Yeah.
So in a decision handed down by the Supreme Court Justice Michael Copley on Thursday, the 27th of February, this home buyer, his name was Stephen, was ordered to forfeit his deposit, his $98,500, to the vendor of this property in Shayla Park that he had agreed to buy in January 2024. And this fellow, Stephen, unknowingly fell victim to the state's strict property purchase laws and banking transfer limits.
Yeah, it's sad. It really is.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
So he was purchasing a property and his offer was $985,000. And he went to his bank and he suddenly realised he can't take out $98,500 in one lump. So he was paying it in 4 installments. And the last installment was paid on January the 25th back in 2024. The problem was that it had been due to be paid in full on January 23rd under the sale contract that he signed.
Absolutely. Now, lesson 1 here, guys, this is really important. It is such a valuable lesson for first home buyers to learn before you make it yourself. In some states, including Queensland, time is of the essence. It is a contractual element of the contract. And that means if you miss a deadline, you are in breach of the contract and the other party can choose to seek remedies against you. And Veronica, obviously the seller in this case went, yeah, I'm not going to sell it to you and I'm going to go for everything that I possibly can. We always tell our clients to increase their internet banking limits at the start of the search so that they can pay the deposit on time.
Yep. And then there's another lesson, though, at this early stage.
At this very early stage. We've got 10 for you, so hold on to your hat. The second part of, or the lesson 2 is that getting the wording right on the contract of sale is essential. So in Queensland, the selling agent prepares the contract, but the buyer has the opportunity and should always get that contract reviewed by a solicitor, so a property expert. And this is where you really need to be educated. You must instruct your solicitor or your buyer's agent about how long you need to be able to transfer the deposit so that the wording on the contract is correct. Not many people can pay a 10% deposit on the day and have it arrive in the trust account of whoever the deposit holder is.
And the problem also is, I know this with my clients, often I'll say to them, you know, like, do you have a borrowing, like a transfer limit? And they don't even know. You know, they don't actually know. And so if you...
So we haven't had to transfer that much money before.
If no one's thought to ask him or mention it, or he hadn't even thought to check, then that's how you can easily get caught out. So this fellow, Stephen, he thought he could still buy the home because the real estate agent assured him in a text message the actual day after the deposit was due, so that he'd started paying his installments. And so the January 23rd, which is the deadline, came and went. And the day after that, the agent sent him a text message that said, oh, don't worry, you can pay tomorrow. And so, you know, he was claiming that the agent induced him to adopt an expectation that late payment of the deposit was allowed. But the judge didn't agree with that. He was basically saying, well, the agent was under no instructions from the vendor to do that or say that, and so therefore that doesn't count.
And they didn't have the authority to, is what the ruling was. So here's lesson 4. You know, whilst you should talk to the real estate agent if you encounter any problems, any extensions or requests for amendments to conditions must be agreed in writing by the solicitors before the expiry date and time of the condition. So now, if that means, you know, you can ask the agent and you can negotiate with the agent, but it can only be confirmed by the seller's solicitor or the seller if they're self-acting. So if they don't have a solicitor themselves.
Sort of needed to be done probably January 22nd, not January 24th as well, because it had to be done before.
It had to be done by 5 p.m. on the 3rd of January, 23rd of January, apologies. Had to be done before 5 p.m. because that is the date, time is of the essence, that is the date when the condition is due, which was the payment of the deposit.
So they haven't got it in writing and they haven't done it in time anyway. So on the day that the money was due to be paid, that's the 23rd of January, this Stephen was told by his bank that he would need to personally attend the bank's branch if he wished to increase the limit on the amount of money he could transfer. Otherwise, his limit was $50,000 per day. So therefore, he was on the very day, and he could. So at that point of time,
could have done it.
He could have actually followed procedure. He could have gone to the bank and done that, or he could have submitted through the proper channels because he had time to do it properly. But he didn't have enough time to get to the bank, and clearly not prioritising and realising the gravity of his decisions at this point. He didn't make it a priority. You know, like if he knew it was going to cost him $100,000, do you think maybe he would have
hot-footed it down to the bank at lunchtime?
So he probably, you know, I know we've got lots of lessons here, but one of them probably is having a really good lawyer, because it doesn't sound like he had much in the way of advice before he actually signed a contract here. Anyway, he didn't transfer any money to the real estate agent's trust account that day. So all the money he transferred was actually the day after the deadline. So he's...
And the day after.
And the day after that.
Yeah. Now, here's lesson number 5, Veronica. It doesn't matter that he couldn't get to the bank and increase his limit. It doesn't matter. That's not an excuse.
Who cares?
It's like, you know, it's like when you say to a policeman, oh, I didn't realise what the speed limit was. You know, ignorance is not a defence in the law. A contract is a contract. And if you want to vary a contract, then due process needs to be followed.
I think some people are a bit cavalier about what they sign. They're not realising that, you know, the seriousness
gravity of it. Yeah.
So the seller of the home, Mrs. Jan, she now gets to keep that deposit plus interest.
Ouch.
So $98,500, and he has to then add to that interest and that's over a year's worth of interest as well, because this was January 2024.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we know what the actual interest was. It's
We don't know the
actually in
rate.
this article. Yep. So we don't know what it was, but just
let's-
the ruling.
Let's
applied.
say it was 5% for argument's sake. It's close to $5,000.
It's going to be more out.
So that makes it
Yeah.
all cost him more than $100,000. Ouch.
Absolutely, yeah. So lost his deposit, has to pay interest as well. So he's got to find some more money to give.
Oh dear.
So no house.
So this Stephen, our buyer, he then was seeking a court order to force her to proceed, Mrs. Jan, this is, to proceed to sell the property to him, right? So, so he's seeking a court order.
That. So she's terminated and he's gone, no, I want the property. And remember, so 2024, January 2024, we're in a rapidly rising market, highly competitive, lots and lots of buyers competing for property, a tough time for buyers. But here's lesson number 7. So he's saying that she has no right to terminate the contract is what he has, is the case that he's brought forward, or the argument that he's brought forward, that she can't terminate this contract. But in fact, the standard REIQ contract, which is done in consultation with the Queensland Law Society and is the main format of contracts that are used in Queensland. It specifically outlines the remedies if the buyer does not meet their contractual obligations in relation to time being of the essence. So it's actually there in writing that she can.
So I love it when someone stamps their feet in the ground and goes, she can't do that. Well, actually, she can, and here's where it's written. And you signed it. You signed it, mate.
And you signed it. Yeah.
Oh, and this is so terrible because it is so tragically avoidable. And honestly, if you follow the process that we teach you, this wouldn't happen because there's lots of reasons why it wouldn't happen. But anyway, all right. So Mrs. Jan, the owner of the property, she resisted the making of the order and sought the forfeiture of the deposit. So he tried to make her sell it to him, and then she went, no, and I want the deposit. So the judge concluded that Stephen failed to establish that the real estate agent acted within the scope, it was a woman actually, because of her actual or ostensible authority when she sent him text messages on January 24th. So he's relying on the agent to go, yeah, it's all right, don't you worry. And yet the vendor is saying that she gave the agent no such authority. Mm-hmm. And there was no evidence of that authority either.
So there's evidence that she sent the text, and we'll read that shortly. There's no evidence that she had the authority to send that text.
Yeah. So the text message said, hi, Stephen, you may need to deposit today. Even that's pretty casual, isn't it? It's actually a day after the deadline. Call me if you have any issues.
Lesson number 8, right? Remember, the contract stated he had to pay it on the 23rd, and this text has come from the agent on the 24th. Now, it's not the agent's responsibility to tell you to pay the deposit. You've got the contract. You've read it. You've got to pay that deposit. And if you haven't contacted your solicitor the day that the contract gets signed, they will not have sent you their normal welcome aboard email and all the dates and relevant things and all that sort of stuff. So I'm suspecting that because the deposit was due on the day the contract was signed, which is a pretty tenuous thing to do. You don't have enough time to do all of that. But I'm suspecting he's just gone, oh, well, I'll do it when I can. And the agent's gone, there's no deposit in our trust account. You got to do it. So not the agent's responsibility, buyers.
Yeah. The lesson note really is don't sign a contract without getting legal advice. You know, I've told the story about when I bought my first property, and it's pure luck that I actually got over the line because I had no idea what I was doing. It was years before I was in real estate. Yeah. And people are cavalier when they don't know what the risks are, and this is a classic example.
Yes, but it is actually clearly outlined in the contract, and that's the thing. It wasn't hidden. It is in the contract. Yeah. And if he signed that contract, it is a given that he has read it.
It should have. Yes. So at about 9:00 a.m. the day after he was meant to have paid the deposit, he transferred roughly half of it. He transferred $45,000 to the agent's trust account.
It's already in breach.
It's already in breach.
It's already in breach. The deposit was due on the 23rd.
But not only that, he's got to pay $98,500 and his bank's got a limit of 50 grand a day. Well,
Getting into that bank.
he's stretching it out to 3 days as it is, because 45 plus 50 is 95. He's still short after 2 days. So anyway, anyway, 5 minutes after that, he sent the agent a text message which said, "Do apologise, deposit today and balance tomorrow. Very sorry, bank is painful to deal with." At 10:58 a.m., the agent replied, "Okay, as long as I let seller know, 2 deposits today and tomorrow." And then the buyer did not hear anything further from the agent.
Which brings us to lesson 9. At this point, the buyer should have instructed their solicitor to confirm the agreement to the payment of the deposit extension in writing. It's now an extension that has to be agreed by the seller, and that's through the channels of the solicitor.
Not a text message from the agent without any authority. And then he went ahead and got his building and pest inspection the following afternoon. And then the next day he transferred the 40,000 and then 10,000. And then his brother sent another 3,500. So in 3 transactions the following day, 2 days late, he finally got the full deposit paid.
Yep. Now we're 2 days late, 2 days after the due date for the payment of the deposit. At this point, the owner has every right to terminate the contract.
And 3 days later, this is January 28th now, the agent told his name's Stephen, Mr. Evans, it's all in the paper, via a text message that Mrs. Jan did not want to sell the house to him and was going to cancel the contract. Imagine getting that by text.
How do you get that text?
You've just transferred nearly $100,000 and someone goes, "Oh, no, don't want to sell it to you anymore."
Then she was in her rights to, as brought down by this finding.
Yeah.
And she was terminating because he failed to pay the deposit by the due date and in accordance with the contract.
He did not fulfill his obligations. So the next day, the vendor's lawyers told his solicitors that she had terminated the contract because he had failed to pay the deposit by the due date in accordance with the contract. And Mrs. Jan told the court that she never authorised a real estate agent or requested her to agree to any extension of time for payment of the deposit. And she deposed that at no time did the agent ask her to agree to an extension.
Ouch. Wow. Okay, so that is the extent of the story. Now, you can actually read this if you're interested in case law. So that finding is available. That decision is available if you want to search it. But for Veronica and I, we really, really, really want to really bring home to you how important it is that you always meet your contractual obligations, because this can happen to you. And can you imagine how long it would have taken a first home buyer to save $98,500? And that's potentially, half of their 20% if they've lost that. So, Veronica, lesson 10 is, how could this have been avoided? Because it's completely avoidable. Now, we always recommend that you increase your internet banking limit before you start your property search. Be aware, be informed. We, as a buyer's agency, have a specific set of conditions that we use. These have been drafted by a solicitor. You never write your own conditions. That gives our buyers time and protection. So important that you get a solicitor to check the conditions on any offer that you make, so that you have enough time to transfer the money. And it has to reach the deposit holder's trust account in time. It's not just that you send it. You've got to give yourself enough time that it actually lands.
And I think I'd labour that point in terms of how could this have been avoided. It could have been avoided if he got legal advice before he signed a contract.
Yes.
And the thing is that the agent would have said, "You don't need to worry about that because we've got the contract here.
Yeah.
You can just sign it and then
it's conditional and you've got a cooling off period."
Yeah, you get all this stuff done. It's easy. Don't worry about it. The agent sounds a little bit loose, in the sense just sending text messages and not checking with the vendor and all that sort of stuff. And so, and it's not.
But it's not the agent's responsibility.
It's not her responsibility to go through line by line everything in that contract that you are committing yourself to. It is your responsibility. And so sometimes people are a little bit too cavalier, and I think that it's just imperative that we take it very, very seriously when we are signing a contract, let alone any contract, let alone a contract to sell a property, for $1 million nearly, and with a deposit for nearly $100,000. It's just
my heart.
It's awful. It's a very, very terrible situation. I'm sure the poor guy head is spinning with disbelief that this could happen to him. But the reality
He's now not got a property and he hasn't got his deposit in a rapidly rising market.
Yeah. But the thing is, this is your responsibility, buyers. This is why we labour the point to learn how to do everything in the right order. And the key takeaway here is that when time is of the essence, you must meet the terms of the condition before the deadline. Even 5 minutes late could be catastrophic. You know, they have a date and they have a time, and you've got to comply. You've got to do your job.
Yep.
Do your job as a buyer.
Cannot ignore. Now, I hope that you really take away, I mean, we're going to say it again, you must meet the deadlines and the conditions of a contract, if it's a conditional contract, or even settlement, you know, all these things.
Yeah.
So really important, keep this in mind, get your advice before you sign contracts and make sure you meet all your deadlines, or have negotiated extensions through your legal representative.
Now, the funny thing is that I try to work out whether she'd sold it subsequently. And usually, if somebody is going to rescind a contract like this or terminate a contract like this, it's the sort of thing that can happen in a rising market. It's the sort of thing that can happen when the owner thinks, God, prices have actually risen even in the last month. I reckon I can get more for that. And now I don't know what her reason was, other than the fact she didn't actually comply with the terms of the contract. I don't know what her reasons were for not selling it. She might have just got shits with him. Who knows? People do crazy things.
Yeah.
But the point being that in a rising market, you got to be thinking there's always that pressure. You know, as a buyer, you must have this enormous relief that you've finally got, you know, I've finally got the property in a rising market. But, you know, that's a risk if you don't fulfill your obligations and do everything that you need to do to seal the deal, to finish the job, you know, and that's
just getting the contract isn't the end of it.
That's
it's
it.
A lot of work to do.
Yeah. So it's anyway, we're very sad for Stevens.
Very sad for him. And look, I would imagine that there probably was a caveat. You know, I'm just drawing assumptions here. It's certainly not what I read in the finding, but there was probably a caveat put on that property that prevented it being sold. So you know, that had an impact.
Possibly his lawyers applied one, you mean? Yeah.
Possibly. Yeah.
What a mess.
That's certainly not what I've read or know anything about, but, you know, it's a possibility.
A possibility. All right.
Now, have you joined our Facebook group yet? This is a great place to share this kind of information. It's called Your First Home Buyer Guide Australia, and it's your opportunity to connect with us and ask us your questions. You'll get answers from us, which means you can be sure you're not going to be led down the garden path.
Yep. And a quick note, you might think that we cover everything that you need to know in these podcasts. A word of warning, we do not. We just scratch the surface. We're talking top line here. If you really want to be an educated home buyer, first home buyer, any buyer really, you need to learn all of the steps and how to do everything in the right order. And this is a classic example of missing a very critical step. A small one in the whole scheme of things is a lot of steps, right? Small but hugely important one. And you really need to learn so that you don't, you know, you just don't make avoidable mistakes.
Yeah. Your First Home Buyer Guide only costs $990. You know, it could save you a $100,000 loss. If you get direct access to us, we can guide you through your negotiations. You can also share the link of any property you're thinking of buying, and we can help you work out whether it's A, B, C grade or an absolute no-go zone. Now, trust me, you will buy better with our guidance, and you'll overpay by an awful lot more than $1,000 if you don't know what you're doing.
In this episode, we've only touched on a tiny part of the huge amount of things you need to know to become an educated first home buyer. There is so much more for you to do. You can learn all of the steps in the right order and avoid all of the mistakes that others have made in our 10-step online course for first home buyers.
If you'd like to learn more about the right process and avoid making rookie errors, become an educated home buyer. Head over to the website, check out Your First Home Buyer Guide, the course that we have created for you. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you won't miss an episode. And if you've liked what you've heard today, please give us an iTunes review. It helps other people find us. And of course, I know it's a bit cringy, but we're going to ask for 5 stars. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you've found this really useful. And if you have, please share the love with others who you know are in the same boat. We'll be back next week with more priceless stuff.